Welcome to Herself, a space for women to have deep conversations about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential, so you can become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. After being in business for over 2 decades, I've learned, as you likely have too, that as you grow your business grows you in unexpected, often challenging, yet miraculous ways. Here, we'll talk about how to get out of your own way so you can grow a business that's abundant and sustainable while allowing you to be a force for good in the world. I'll give you simple, actionable strategies as well as wisdom and inspiration to help you root into your wholeness, lead from your values, and work in ways that feel deeply aligned so you can bring your true self into the world through your business and in every area of your life. So today we're going to explore something that's not necessarily a very sexy topic, but it's an important one. And if it's an area where we feel weak, it's an opportunity to become strong. I know that we all have different levels of comfort with this. So we are living, you don't need me to tell you this, but we are living in a heavily digital time. And as business owners, it's important for us to stay up to date with technology, to continually see how it can support us to do things in a more streamlined way. And in the meantime, to also acknowledge what season of business we're in, what our bandwidth for technology is, what our comfort level is, and adjust things accordingly. One of the things that I tell the women that I mentor is to never outsource something in your business relating to technology until you know how to do it for yourself. So for instance, you don't want to hire a virtual assistant or a VA to manage your email list if you don't first know how to do that yourself. Now, the same is not true, with someone building your website or things like that. Those are more specialty things, but kind of like the nuts and bolts of things that need to happen day in and day out in your business, you want to be able to do that yourself, at least at a basic level. Otherwise, you won't be able to effectively manage people or projects, or if someone leaves or something happens unexpectedly, then you're not in full command of your business and you're going to be left in a really vulnerable position. So I'm going to share technology that I've used during different seasons of my business over the past few years, and also ways that I regularly audit that technology to see if things need to be eliminated or added. And when I talk about technology in my business, I talk about my tech stack. That's kind of just like an industry phrase, like what is your tech stack? In the old iteration of my business prior to 2019, when I had closed things down, technology was so different then. It was a lot more complicated. It was needing to piece a lot more things together. So I'm not going to talk about the technology I used then, but I'm going to start out back in 2021 when I started to rebuild my business. At that time, my main focus was on simplicity and sustainability. I intentionally did not want to hire any team members. In 2019, I felt kind of burned out with having a team. I just wanted it just to be me and to not need to manage anyone, just to have a lot of freedom in that way. And I was very intentional about the tech stack that I was cultivating because I wanted to make sure that, again, it was not too complex. So I did a lot of research. I consulted with experts and friends in the field for their input. And I also had an eye on keeping my financial overhead low while I rebuilt to help keep my stress levels down and also to have a higher profit margin. I wanted to have more to spend in my personal life. I had wanted to really accelerate my savings and my retirement investments. So the core thing that I really looked at was my email service provider, and the acronym for that is ESP. This is so central. I really think this is the most important piece of software that you can have in your business. One of my business coaches, Andrea Lee, in the past, she called this your golden goose. Like, your email list is your golden goose. It's your community. It's the people that you stay in relationship with over a period of time. And no matter what's going on in the world or what happens with other pieces of technology, like if Meta goes down and you don't have access to Facebook or Instagram, you still have your email list. You own that. So back in 2021, I was on MailChimp at that time. That's what I downsized to when I shut everything down. 2 years prior. And at that point, when I shut things down, I was on Keep, which used to be called Infusionsoft, which, to be honest, I never liked. I found it incredibly complicated. And I actually broke my own rule because I never really did fully learn how to use that. One of my virtual assistants trained in it, knew how to use it. And it was just too much for me at that time with other things that I was juggling. So when I rebuilt, or rather than when I knew when I was closing everything down, I wanted to just keep recurring expenses as low as possible. So I switched to something that was much more simple, much more affordable. And at that time, that was MailChimp. So I had MailChimp, I had Stripe for credit card processing, which I highly recommend as a credit card processor. I took down my very robust WordPress website that I had spent a lot of money on that had really beautiful branding, but it just didn't fit me anymore. And instead of that website, I created a super simple one-page site on something called card.co, CARRD.co. It cost $19 a year. I built it myself over a series of maybe a couple of days. It was nothing fancy at all, but it was simple, it was clean, and it did the job. So I used that up until May of last year, May of 2023, when I knew I was going to need a more robust website again, especially with my new book coming out this year in 2024. So at that time, I transitioned away from Card to Showit, which I absolutely love. I highly recommend, and it has a WordPress functionality in terms of their blog. And so while I don't have a blog, I do have a podcast, and that functions like a blog within Showit. So I had MailChimp, I had Showit, and so back in 2021, I had MailChimp, super simple website. Before I moved to Showit, I had the card website. And I also knew I needed a place where I could build landing pages for free offers, like if I was doing a free class, invitation pages for my programs, and also a place to house my online programs themselves for the students who were going through them. A friend and a colleague was and is a huge advocate of Kajabi. And I explored it. And while it was and is a big investment, I knew that was the platform that I wanted to rebuild things on. It was a bit of a learning curve to really get to understand how to navigate it. I needed to learn how to use it, but bit by bit I did. And Kajabi, they have an excellent support chat. I've probably been on that over 100 times over the past few years. But I built the sales pages for my programs. It also has checkout pages for processing payments. It has the membership areas for all of my programs in the back end. And I continue to use that for those web pages, while Showit houses my kind of core website pages like About Me and the homepage and contact page and podcast page and things like that. So I really love Kajabi. It was a very worthwhile investment. It was definitely a leap. It was acknowledging like, okay, I'm taking on a bit of a bigger overhead, and it's just become so central. I've really built things up around that. And I'm in there multiple times a day. My team is in there multiple times a day. And of course, my students are in there a lot as well. Then when once more money was coming in and I felt like I had more bandwidth, and actually when I hired one of my first team members at the recommendation of that same tech expert colleague who recommended Kajabi, I moved from MailChimp over to ConvertKit for my ESP, and soon ConvertKit is going to just be called Kit. So while Kajabi is an all-in-one platform, like you can build your website there, you can have programs there, you can have a shopping cart, email service provider. They even have a podcast host, which I use as a private podcast for one of my programs. I tried their emails for a bit, and I didn't find it had the best deliverability. I wanted something that was really just kind of top of the line, but within my budget. And while it's an extra expense, I opted to go with ConvertKit. And while it added more complexity, I opted to go with ConvertKit rather than just having everything under one umbrella in Kajabi, which I was originally intending to do. But again, I wasn't so happy with how the email delivery went for me. So I transferred everything over to ConvertKit, and I've been using that for the past couple of years. I have to say, I really, really love it. It's my favorite, the favorite email service provider I've ever used. It's great customer support. It's really intuitively laid out. So I'm really happy with where I landed with my website on Showit, my all the other pieces on Kajabi, and then my email service provider with ConvertKit. So those are my basics. And then, I also have a podcast. I started my podcast back in 2015. And also, not only was the technology landscape very different at that time, the podcast landscape was very different at that time. So my podcast host then was SoundCloud, which my former tech guy recommended. So I stayed on that as I rebuilt my business. But as things started to grow more, I knew I wanted something more robust, and things like tracking downloads and the ability to have a private podcast, things like that. So I switched over to Captivate for my podcast hosts after much research, and I'm really, really loving my experience with them. Also, in the realm of podcasts, we use Descript for editing out things like ums and filler words. And Descript gives your recordings a studio sound, so it uplevels the sound. You can also edit videos and do things like Instagram Reels, adding captions to those. And a lot more is possible, I know, with Descript, but those are some of the things that we're using it for now. And we use it for every podcast episode that we put out. When I say we, right now I have 2 core part-time contractors who work with me. One is a business manager who oversees all the operations in the business, and she also does customer and client care. Another is more of a tech and admin virtual assistant who does things like editing the podcast and videos, formatting emails, tracking metrics, things like that. But when I was rebuilding, I made sure to keep everything as simple as possible so I could do it all myself. We use Asana for project management. I use the free version of that. In the old iteration of my business, I used Basecamp, which I loved, and it's also more expensive. And Asana, this free version of Asana works really well too. So for now, I don't see any reason to leave that. All of our communication happens in Asana. We don't use email. And for more like real-time communication, or if things are more urgent or pressing, we use Slack, and I use the free version of Slack as well. We use Google Calendar and Google Drive for all of our documents and spreadsheets, Gmail for customer care, Dropbox for storing digital assets like audios, videos, PDFs, graphics, photos. And now we'll go into some kind of more of the bells and whistles, you could say. So Advent, this is a calendar software that we added in just under a year ago. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. And it's calendar software so students can add events to their calendars in one click. Now, I love being in programs that offer this. It's definitely a perk. It's not necessary, but for me, I find it helps to make things more clear for everyone, just to really see what's happening when and where. And more clarity ultimately generates a greater level of safety for students. We use ManyChat for automatic messaging on Instagram. You can also do it on Facebook, but we just have it set up on Instagram. So for example, maybe in a reel about a podcast episode, like for this podcast episode, if I create a reel about this, I'll say comment or DM the word podcast, and I'll send you the link to the episode. I've mostly used the free version, but sometimes during a launch, we upgrade to a paid version to have more functionality. There's so much more that can be done here, but right now, these are just the basics that we are doing. We use Plan for social media scheduling, although to be completely transparent, I have not been using it. I've been intending to, and I think bandwidth has been limited this year with my book launch and the other projects that we've been working on. So I plan to revisit this when it's time for the subscription to renew in the fall, but I do have the intention to get in there and to get things scheduled through that app. We use Wise Stamp for creating email signatures with clickable links, and I find that this just gives a really professional look to email signatures. Also, this is a perk. It's definitely not a necessity. Canva Pro for graphics. Actually, this should probably go up more in the non-negotiable area because I am in there all the time. We are in there all the time, creating graphics of, creating things for social media, creating things for our programs, slide decks, you name it. And the pro version is definitely worth it. Acuity for appointment scheduling. I'm really happy with that. There was actually a point this year when I attempted to switch over to Calendly, and there was some sort of a glitch in, because the way that I use Gmail is that I have a personalized email address, like hello@sarahvonstover.com, but it was like redirect. It was just showing people like the root Gmail address rather than the more professional email address, and they weren't able to fix that. So I stayed with Acuity, and I'm still really happy with Acuity. We use ThriveCart for checkout pages, and something that I like about ThriveCart is just a one-time fee. I think for the pro version of ThriveCart, I think I paid just under $500. So it's not an annual subscription. And I switched over from just using the Kajabi checkout pages. So again, I started to make things a little bit more complex and and moving out of just trying to keep everything under one umbrella, because colleagues really raved about it and has more functionality than Kajabi checkout pages. Colleagues have said that there's higher conversion rates with their checkout pages. So I switched over last summer. I'm really happy with it. And it also has an affiliate program, but Kajabi has an affiliate program too. We use Zapier, and I'm never sure how to pronounce it, if it's Zapier or Zapier, to link pieces of software together to help them talk to one another. So for instance, when someone purchases a program through ThriveCart, through the checkout page in ThriveCart, Zapier links them to get added to that program in Kajabi. And there's other ways that we use that, but that's just an example. It just helps different pieces of software to talk to each other automatically. I use Typeform and Google Forms for various applications and forms. Use different ones for different things. And the free versions of those, although when I'm going through a program launch that requires an application, then I'll upgrade to the paid version of Typeform because I'll know there'll be kind of more of those coming in. Of course, I use Zoom for teachings and meetings and things like that. LastPass for password storage and also sharing passwords with team members. Then I use a free version of Chatra, and this is a chat/messaging widget on my program pages and landing pages for free offers in case people run into any problems when they're trying to sign up for something, and it just gives an extra level of customer support. For bookkeeping, I use QuickBooks, but when I was first starting out, I just use simple Excel spreadsheets, or maybe it's even like the Apple version. I forget what it is, what the Apple version is for. Maybe it's just called Sheets. I use that just for tracking my business and personal income and expenses. But then once things started to get more complex, I hired a bookkeeper, and she does the bookkeeping inside QuickBooks. So then once a quarter, I have a recurring event on our team Google Calendar to do a tech stack audit. And inside that event, there's a link to a Google Doc with the list of all of the technology that we have, all the things I just named for you. So we can really see if these are needed or not, and can eliminate things, can add things. Then we have the renewal dates on the calendar with their cost. So as those renewal dates approach, can really consciously see, is this something we want to continue on with or not? So with all this, I invite you to ask yourself, what season of business am I in right now? Do I want to keep things simple? What is my bandwidth for technology? What is the kind of business model that I want to have? Do I want to do it all myself? Do I want to do it mostly all myself and to have one other, maybe part-time virtual assistant who helps with things? Do I want to have a small team? Do I want to grow to have a bigger team? And are you in a season of business where maybe you want to add in some more extras? And if so, in what areas? In kind of customer delivery, in podcast editing, in your website? So remember, we want to start with the basics. So with a website, you want to keep it super simple at first. A one-pager is fine. Do not invest a lot in your website right out of the gate. An automatic scheduler is a really good idea. Calendly has a free option. I know many others do too, but Calendly is quite popular. Zoom for meetings and if you're teaching classes, an email service provider, a checkout process, and a way to take payments. So again, Kajabi is an all-in-one option, and you can do a website on there, you can do landing pages, you can have your online courses, you can have a podcast, you can have an affiliate program, checkout pages, email service provider. So if I were starting over completely from scratch, that is what I would start with and just do everything on there. And then if I wanted to diversify as I went, that's what I would do. And these days, there's also so many templates that you can buy for Kajabi, for the website, for the landing pages, even for the back end of courses. And I have bought a number of these templates and I just use them over and over and over again. So things are changing. Technology is rapidly changing, and AI functionality is also being integrated into many of these. I know there are so many other kinds of technology that can be used again, but these are the things that I have really intentionally chosen to embrace after just investigating what's important to me and what's needed during this season of business. In the show notes, you can find links to many of these if you want to check them out. These are affiliate links, and I only endorse things that I personally use and recommend. You can also find there a link for a free 30-day trial of Kajabi if you want to check that out. And I also want to acknowledge that if you talk to me a year from now, things may look different, but this is where I am now. And I only really want to shift things if there's a very good reason for that. Because again, I like to keep things as streamlined and simplified and effective as possible. So I hope that me kind of pulling the curtain back and sharing my tech stack with you maybe gives you some inspiration, gives you some new resources, gives you some things to think about in your own business. And I hope it was supportive. And again, overarching message is that in whatever areas of life or business that we feel that we are weak, that we feel that we are not empowered, that we don't know much, there's always the opportunity to become strong. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, change doesn't come from listening alone. I invite you to commit to taking one small or large courageous action after today's conversation. One step you can take if you haven't already is to sign up for my Sunday journal. It's a weekly newsletter filled with inspiration and reflections about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential to help you become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. You can subscribe at programs-sarahavaughnstover.com/journal. And if you found this podcast valuable, please share it with the women in your world. Also, I'd be very grateful if you'd leave a review. It helps others find resources like this, and I'd love to hear what's coming alive for you after listening today. Above all, keep going. And never forget the unique offerings you and your true self bring to the world. Until next time, I'm sending you my heartfelt support.